Several NERD sampling programs underway. We started with shoreline assessment in mid-July, and that ran for about a month and a half. And that was teams going up and down all the shoreline along the coast and assessing them for damage. Kind of parallel to what the assessment teams were doing for cleanup, but this group was specifically looking for and documenting any damage. We've also done a submerged aquatic vegetation process using these vessels, and that was out near the islands, mostly on the north side of the islands, and putting out chains on the bottom of the sound that we'll show you here in a minute with absorbent material, pom-poms or snares on the chains that were anchored on the bottom and around and near the sand beds, or excuse me, the vegetation beds of seagrasses, to determine whether or not there was oil moving on the bottom going into those beds and seeing if there was any concern for damage. They also did samples of the seagrasses, looking for the health and the growth rates of those seagrasses to see if there was any impact on that. We don't have the results on that, but those are some of the things that we've done there. We've done a oyster. We've got an oyster program in the works right now. They're coming to the end of one segment of that, where we've done on the oyster reefs off Pasture Chan, mapping the reefs, have divers in the water. We've had divers in the water collecting tissue samples and looking at the overall health of the reef, and again, also taking water sediment samples in those areas as well. Again, for damage assessment as opposed to response. The current program that we've got going on, the submerged oil NERDA process, there's 60 sites scattered from just offshore Mississippi Sound out to 20-meter depth south of the islands. At those 60 sites, at each site, they will run 4 transects, north-south, and they'll go 1 kilometer. They'll do a chain drag with pom-poms on it for 1 kilometer, see if they can pick up any material off the bottom. Then they will also set out on each transect, each of the 4 transects, 3 sets of buoys that will have pom-poms on a chain on the bottom and then pom-poms up the ropes to the buoy. Those will be set out. They're left out for 24 to 72 hours. Then we come back and pick up those pom-poms. They've got a dark room set up on the boat that they will then take a UV light and inspect those pom-poms with UV light. If there's any oil there, it will shine or fluoresce an orange color, so we'll be able to tell there's oil there. A little bit difference between response and damage assessment in the submerged oil. When we were doing the response process, we were looking for recoverable material, enough material that would warrant being able to get out there and try to pick it up, something that would be a risk to come inshore. With the damage assessment, a positive hit is any speck of oil shows up on those pom-poms. You put out a 20-foot length of chain, and it's got a dozen pom-poms on it, and 1 pom-pom comes up with 1 pea-sized speck of oil on it. For damage assessment, that's a positive hit. So we have had some positive hits, particularly out around the islands. We still have some tar balls and things being exposed and coming up there, so it's not unexpected. But we are continuing to look at that and document where those are so that we can do a good damage assessment of that process.
Does dispersant fluoresce or present differently?
As far as I know, the dispersant does not. It's more water soluble, and if it were connected to the oil, we would see the oil, and not particularly dispersant. I'm not sure whether it does or not.
Do you know whether you can visibly see it on a pom-pom? You have dispersant on it? I mean,
you shouldn't. The dispersants are, once they're in the water column, they're in such low concentrations that it should not be visible on a pom-pom.
How intense is the effort? I mean, mostly on that.
Well, it depends on which program. Again, there's multiple NERDA processes going on for the submerged vegetation. There's 2 boats doing that on a daily basis. And they're out virtually every day that the weather permits. They're out setting out new buoys or picking material up and evaluating.
And what's the normal crew on a boat?
Normal crew is 1 DEQ person and there's usually 3 or so NOAA personnel. Our captains back here might be able to tell us a little bit more. I'm not one of the ones that actually doing the sampling. I've got my staff doing that sampling.
We got 3 crew members on the boat.
3 crew members that operate the boat, and then 4 sampling personnel. Okay, one of the sampling events we did. This was a setup for the submerged aquatic vegetation sampling program. Float with a piece of line. What we got here is a polyethylene piece of polyethylene material that was on a clip here that would float in the water, and then another piece of that was put inside this little sampling case, wound around the post in there, and then sealed up. And this was set over in the water. The chain was just as an anchor, and that would be set over in the water, so that we had 2 pieces of this polyethylene material that would collect oil on it, and that would be left out for up to 72 hours, and then they bring it back in and check it for any oil on it. And this was used around the grass beds, where we had to be careful about any disturbing of the bottom. We needed something that would sit still because we didn't want to drag something through and damage the grass beds. So this is one of the units that they use for that process. Again, we're at a stopping point on that one. They may very well come back again and repeat this process at a future date, but they've worked through that process. One of the other things they did was they used set out buoy systems with chain, and we would take these chains, and they've got a weight on each end, and they would be set to lay on the bottom near the grass beds, and then we take the pom-pom material, we would tie that to the chain, and we would have several of these pom-poms down the chain. And again, these were set out near the grass beds so that if anything moved in or out of those beds, we would pick up the oil on the absorbent material there. And again, they would evaluate that with ultraviolet light, the way they would check that for oil. The current process with the submerged aquatic vegetation is again the oil process is using again this type of buoy setup. Again, at each site there'll be 12 of these buoys set up with pom-pom on the chain, and also pom-pom material clipped at 3 locations up the float rope. Getting all tangled up here. So we would have one pom-pom near the top, one in the center, and then one near the bottom of this float. So that's one of the things that's being done. The other is we're actually doing a chain drag in areas where there is not aquatic vegetation. Try to demonstrate this for you. They found they had to tie these onto the chain like this, if we just tied the top and let it float freely, the material didn't offer much resistance, so if there were tar balls or something down there, they may just float out of the way and not actually collect the oil on the pom-pom. So it had to be secure so that there was a little more resistance to the material. So this is what's then loaded over, and then we do a drag across the bottom to see what kind of material we get up. And let's see if we can do this.
Around that right there, and whenever we go, we'll just throw it out, and I'll kick the engine in gear and let the line come taut. And got it, Charlie? Yeah. Hey, Charlie, whenever we throw this out, don't pay it all out yet. Whenever we throw it,
Feed it.
yeah, feed it out. I'm just gonna go on this
Right.
course right here,
Oh,
okay?
All right.
So whenever you chunk it, just throw it out, kind of clear that prop. I'll
Hey,
come
can y'all
down
see?
I'll come down on the starboard engine, okay, Charlie? You ready? Y'all ready?
Yeah.
Okay.
Whenever you're ready to deploy, go ahead.
Okay, y'all ready?
Yep.
Here we go. All right.
Clear, Charlie? I just bumped that port engine in gear, Charlie. You want over here?
Nope, good.
1 kilometer.
Yeah, that's about where we started right there at that turn. If you want to pass it up here, we'll help you with it, Charlie. You got it?
Might need some slack.
Y'all catch many crabs this way? Not doing a change right.
No, not the drag.
Seen. Okay, so that's the kind of thing that we're looking at. Of course, it has to be evaluated using the UV light to determine whether or not it is, what's on there is oil or not. This kind of material, as you see the little specks on here, that's what they would typically be looking at to determine whether that's just mud or whether that is in fact it's oil. Don't have the UV light with us today. That's out on the boat being used, so I can't show you that process, but that's basically what we're doing. Again, this is at 60 sites, 4 drags at each site for this phase of that program. And again, once that's done, depending on the number of hits we get, how many of the pom-poms actually show some oil on them, we'll reevaluate and determine whether we do additional sites or we wait and take a break and come back and do it again at at a later time. But we'll be doing these things, generally working them and then doing them in segments, especially the biological stuff. You take samples and wait for a cycle, and then we'll take additional samples. The oyster sampling is winding down, and then spring we'll be out doing additional oyster sampling.